So it's a mocktail,
It's
essentially.
a hot punch mocktail. Yeah, needs more sugar, but I'll give it another go, and I'll introduce a totally different cocktail after the first Test match. The first test of the Ashes series ended in what felt like the blink of an eye, and my apologies to anybody who had tickets to day 3 or day 4 of that match. As we know, it ended inside 2 days in Australia's favour. Plenty to talk about in the Ashes first test review here on Cricket and Cocktails. I'll be joined once again by Alan Bone, and we have a special guest for this episode, the esteemed county cricket commentator, podcaster and writer, Dan Whiting. But before we get to them, here's a recap on what happened over the course of the 2 days of the first Test match. England hold the advantage at stumps. They lead Australia by 49 runs after reducing the hosts to 123 for 9. But this felt unlikely earlier in the day when Mitchell Starc took a career best 7 for 68 to help bowl England out for 172 in 33 overs. He dismissed the big guns Joe Root and Ben Stokes cheaply, and also had Zach Crawley caught behind driving at the ball in the first over of the innings. The bulk of England's runs came from Ollie Pope, 46, and thrillingly from Harry Brook. He made 52 off just 61 balls, often going well forward and across to Australia's pace bowlers to smash the ball through cover. Starc ran through the England tail quickly after Harry Brook was out. He aborted a pull shot too late and gloved a catch to the wicketkeeper Alex Carey down the leg side, and that gave Test debutant Brendan Doggett his first wicket in Test cricket. 3 overs after that dismissal, the England innings was all over. Starc unsettled the tail with skillful use of the shorter pitch ball, and Jamie Smith tried to hit his way out of trouble, and he holed out to Cameron Green hooking to the leg side. But batting seldom looked any easier for Australia either. The hosts limped to 31 for 4 on a bouncy wicket offering seam movement with a new ball. Opener Jake Weatherald had a debut Test innings to forget. He was out second ball LBW on review to Jofra Archer. Travis Head and Cameron Green put on 45 together after that point, and they looked to be steering momentum away from England when the opposition captain Ben Stokes delivered a performance for the ages. Travis Head opened the door, pulling Stokes to cast at short mid-wicket, and then Stokes found subtle seam and swing and some bounce to break through the lower middle order. He finished on 5 for 23. That's the 6th time he's taken 5 wickets in an innings in his Test career, and the 3rd time he's done so against Australia. Behind in the Ashes series in record time after a second innings batting collapse from 65 for 1 to 164, and a brilliant century from Travis Head which handed Australia victory in 2 days. In total, the match lasted for 141 completed overs, making it the shortest ever Ashes Test match on Australian soil. In the England second innings after the early loss of Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, 28, and Ollie Pope, 33, had built the innings lead to 105 before the rot set in. Mark Boland was wicketless in the first innings, but here took 4 for 33. He dismissed Duckett, Pope and Harry Brook in quick succession as England's batters pushed at balls angled away from their body outside the line of off-stump. At one stage, England lost 3 wickets in just 6 balls. Mitchell Starc took 10 wickets in the match. He bowled Joe Root in the second innings and had Ben Stokes caught by Steve Smith. And only a partnership of 50 between Gus Atkinson and Bryden Carse dragged the England target beyond 200. Jamie Smith was perhaps the unluckiest dismissal. He was a judge caught behind after a review that lasted for 5 minutes and appeared to show a spike on snickometer, but after the ball had passed the bat. The target of 205 felt at least par on a pitch that remained quick and bouncy, albeit with a bit less movement than we saw on day 1, but that was not enough to contain Travis Head. He opened the innings with Jake Weatherald and blitzed 123. His century arrived in just 69 balls as Head moved across his crease to unleash fearsome cut and pull shots. It was the second fastest Ashes century in terms of balls faced of all time. By the time he was out hooking Carse to Duckett at mid-wicket, the game was nearly over, and Steve Smith settled the match in Australia's favour with a punch into the offside, again off Bryden Carse. The only other wicket to fall was Jake Weatherald, who was caught by Duckett's in the slips off the same bowler. England have 12 days to regroup ahead of the second test in Brisbane. That starts on December the 4th, and questions will be asked of the batting lineup. It lasted less than 70 overs across both innings in this match, and with 2 ducks off 11 balls faced in the game, the opener Zach Crawley is the most vulnerable. Australia will possibly be strengthened by the return of bowler and captain Pat Cummins, although there's no rush to bring him back now, and there might be another change in the 11 given the back injury to Usman Khawaja, which limited his time in the field over the course of this match. Thank you very much for joining me. That was all over fairly rapidly. your immediate thoughts on the test match? I'll start with you, Dan, and then you, Alan.
Well, it was grim, wasn't it? It was grim. Normally, a quick game's a good game, but not in this instance. It was dreadful. It was absolutely shambolic. 67 overs England batted in the whole test. That's losing a wicket every 20 balls. We just don't learn from our mistakes, do we? We just keep making the same errors over and over again. And it was just miserable. And I'm still angry about it, actually. I'm not just annoyed, I'm actually angry about it.
I think it's disappointing. We've seen shades of this, perhaps at Lords a couple of years ago, to some extent at the Oval last summer, where we had a huge match within our grasp. Alan, I hate to put you on the spot, but in our preview podcast, I did put you on the spot actually and asked you to make a brave prediction. How do you feel now?
It was absolutely gruesome from start to finish, and finish wasn't very long after start, really. I wouldn't write them off for the whole series, actually. I mean, it didn't go well to say the least, but I also think there was enough in that game to tell me this is not a great Australian side. There's still some room for optimism, I feel.
We've mentioned Travis Head, and you said in the preview what a great player he was. And Dan, that was a fabulous. I mean, however you cut it, that was a fabulous innings. Although you could argue England should have posted a few more runs from where they were.
Yeah, you could do. I thought also our bowlers gave up a little bit, but take nothing away from Travis Head. An innings of the highest quality, and credit to the Australian backroom team as well for being flexible in their batting order as well. And you do wonder whether it might be time for England to also be flexible, because I don't think it's working at the top of the order. Mr. Crawley's record over his last 8 innings abroad, where he's got a top score of 21, is pretty grim, and you do wonder whether it's time for change and time to actually sort of just freshen things up a little bit.
Alan, he only faced 11 balls in this whole match combined. So I suppose if you were being optimistic, you could argue that he hasn't been out there for long enough to know if he's in form or not. What do you think?
It doesn't matter what I think or what we think, because I don't think they'll change it. I think they will stick with the same format. I kind of think with Bazball, they've come as far as, they've gone this far. This has been 4 years of planning. They're not going to change. I think he's probably in for the whole series, unless literally he carries on sort of dealing in as it were, binary in this sort of state. But I think he's probably in for the entire series. I just don't think they're going to change their approach. I think they're all in on this way of playing, and that is what they're going to do for good or ill over the next month or so. If it falls and they lose 5-0, clearly there will be a total rethink for next summer. But I don't see them changing partway through.
I think you're right, Alan. I wouldn't disagree with you there. Whether it's the right choice or not, I don't
Mm.
know, because there is a real stubbornness, isn't there, about this sort of England regime. But his track record is pretty dreadful, and
Mm.
I think he looks shot. Covered Kent last year, and I saw quite a bit of him, and he got 250s both in the innings in 6 county championship games, and he's struggling a little bit, and he's a great bloke, but that doesn't get you runs out in the middle.
I think they're probably also looking, back at the 2023 series, and I know that's a couple of years ago, and things move very fast in these times. But that 189 or whatever it was at Old Trafford is still one of the best innings, if not the best, I've seen from an England batsman in terms of taking the game on. But for the rain, England would have won there, and it probably would have been a series-winning innings if they, given they won the last one as well. So I think they're holding on to that. But as you say, Dan, I mean, his recent form has been absolutely appalling. You wouldn't pick him for, village team, frankly, but they'll stick with him, I bet you.
We needed another Kent batter out there. We needed a bit of Chris Tavare,
Oh
didn't we?
Lord,
That's who we needed out there.
gosh.
I was looking at the Old Trafford test,
Oh,
fifth test,
from 81.
1981.
Hmm.
He faced nearly 500 balls in his 69 and 78, but he did a job, and it allowed both them at the other end to go ping, 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 and smash Lilly and Alderman and Lawson and Ray Bright and people like that all around the ground. So, yeah, he definitely did his job.
But there isn't a
Mm.
player in the 11 that does that role now. I mean, if you look at the people that did make runs, Harry Brook made an awful lot of runs charging down the track and making a bit of room outside the off stump to flay through cover. Ollie Pope drives at pretty much everything for the first 10 balls. And as you said in the preview, Alan, it can be a little bit scary to watch those first 10 balls.
I thought
Yeah,
Pope actually looked a lot better, and it was a real shame that he played that drive after lunch in the second innings because I thought both innings he looked. I mean, bearing in mind he was in the first over both times, which is the ultimate sort of test for a number three. I thought both innings he looked a lot better than he has done recently. A lot less jittery, a lot more confident in his footwork and his movement to the ball. I thought the LBW in the first innings was pretty marginal, actually. I know it was given out and it was clipping, but I thought he was a bit unlucky to be given out there. And I thought that was one of the few pluses actually from the game was how he looked, just his whole
yeah.
approach.
I saw a lot of Dominic Sibley in 2024, and Dominic Sibley, yeah, right, he might get his low scores out there, but he won't give it away. He's a lot more fluent than Dominic Sibley we saw for England a few years ago, where he was a bit of a leg side Larry. He's a lot more fluent through the posh side, as we say. And having worked for Gloucestershire for the last few years as well, I interviewed Cameron Bancroft in the summer, who knows a little bit about opening in Perth. And he said you can leave on lengths at Perth. You can actually leave a straight ball on lengths because you know it's going to go over the stumps. And what was disappointing was England know that. Their analysts will have told them that before the game. And yet they're driving on the up outside off stump. And lo and behold, they nick off.
That was particularly true of the second innings, wasn't it? Where we lost, I think it was 3 wickets in 6 balls, and they were all driving at balls on the up that they could have left on length, weren't they?
That's basically where they lost the test match, was that little period after lunch on the second day, and they were 100 and something ahead, 1 wicket down. And then, as you say, 3 wickets for next to nothing. And that's where they lost the game. Even if they'd said Australia 250 or 280, 280, 300 in that last innings, don't think Travis Head would have been able to come out and play like he did. It would have been much harder to have had that approach. They looked completely flat in that second innings, but then you kind of would if you've only been off the pitch for basically a session and then you're back out there again. And the bowlers had to get most of the runs anyway. It was Carson Atkinson who brought a bit of respectability to the batting, wasn't it?
Dan, they didn't have much turnaround either, did they? A couple of hours off the field, and then they were back in batting briefly and then bowling again. We know they haven't had a lot of cricket behind them, which to some extent was self-inflicted. They had that one game at Lilac Hill, whereas some of the Australian players, which we'll get onto in a moment, played a bit of shield cricket. Is that a factor? It's that early on in the series. They hadn't had that much cricket behind them, and the turnaround was so tiny. And could that have contributed to the intensity dipping a little bit in the second innings?
I don't think it's the turnaround. I think it's the psychological damage that the England batting did, and that's why I think the bowlers gave up. Personally, I think they're undercooked. I think that
Mm.
we have gone into a series yet again where we're massively undercooked, and they talk about workload and how much cricket there is. They haven't played a test match since August. That's 3 months off. I don't get that in my job. I don't get 3 months off.
And it's amazing also how some of the more sort of marginal injuries never seem to affect IPL appearances. People seem to
No.
manage to sort of sneak through when there's a few, when there's a few zeros in the dollar column. They seem to manage to find a way to get out of bed and do it. Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, I would as well, I think. I'd get out of bed. But then, if I was wearing those 3 lines on my shirt as well, that would be the ultimate pride for me. So I don't get it. Yes, the bowlers rest them. That's fine. But the batters, I think they need to get some runs under Aussie conditions. And whether that's Canberra, where the ball's bouncing at knee height, or whether it's at Brisbane, where the ball's bouncing at chest height, England needs some runs under their belt, big time.
I think also they've left themselves wide open to criticism if they fail in Brisbane. It's just going to be such an obvious attack that everybody will come in and sort of say, "What on earth have you been doing?" It will be basically 2 weeks off in inverted commas, isn't it? Since losing on the second day of the Test match. And I did hear, I think it was Peter Siddle saying, because he's going, I think, going to be playing in that game, and he said he completely understands why they're not going, given, as you said, the difference in it'll be much lower bounce there, and it won't in any way equates the conditions in Brisbane. But you know, it's cricket. It's with a pink ball. It's at night, so there's already three things that are um, kind of similar.
I'd love a job where, you don't work for 3 months. You rock up for 3 days, get a week off, rock up for 2 days, get 2 weeks off. I wouldn't mind a job like that.
That leads us quite nicely on to the Australian team. That we'll start with Australia's strengths, particularly in day-night tests, and then we'll get on to their weaknesses. Now, we know what an outstanding performer Mitchell Starc is in any conditions, but his record in day-night tests is unbelievable. At 80 plus wickets at an average of about 17. He took 10 wickets, forgive me, in this match at Perth. He must be a huge plus for Australia going into that Brisbane game.
Well, I think
Yeah.
England would be quite pleased if he averaged 17 after the last test, wouldn't he? That would be an improvement for us. They're very, very good in day-night conditions. I guess there are still doubts about Cummings. Hazelwood looks to me like he's probably out for this
Yeah.
next one, if not the whole series. Cummings possibly coming back. It favours them day night. Day-night conditions. The stats tell you it favours them.
They've only lost once in day-night cricket, whereas we've played seven and lost five. And one of them was a good few years ago against a West Indies side that is not as good as this Australian side. And the other was a couple of winters ago against New Zealand in conditions that will probably be quite different, Dan, from what they're likely to see in Brisbane.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the pink ball swings for longer as well. It's got that lacquer on it, hasn't it? Which is why I think Stark has been so prolific in that format of cricket. Scott Boland as well. His record
Yeah.
in Australia is one of the best of all time, and signs are looking ominous. Cummins or no Cummins, I think 5-0 couldn't be more on the cards if I saw Steve McGarrett in Hawaii. I think it's 5-0 written all over it.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Do they need Nathan Lyon? I'll ask either of you that. Do they need Nathan Lyon? He bowled 2 overs in Perth. He wasn't really required, was he?
I think they'll probably pick him in Brisbane just because it gives obviously an option, and he's clearly a world-class bowler with a fantastic record. So I think they'll pick him. I don't know what you think, Dan, but I think they will.
Yeah, they'll go with Nathan Lyon. You need the variety just in case things go wrong as well. And, should it go for longer than 2 days this time as well, I think Stark will chew up the surface in his follow through, being a left arm over, which brings Lyon into play on days 4 and 5. So I think Nathan Lyon will definitely play.
These are Australia's strengths, bowling with the pink ball in day-night conditions. Let's have a little look at their weaknesses. Travis Head was on a level apart from everyone else in the Australian batting. Steve Smith looked probably the most uncomfortable I've ever seen of him in Australian conditions in the first innings at Perth. Khawaja was fairly anonymous. He had some back problems and he was discarded in his traditional spot at the top of the order on both occasions in Perth. There are some problems in the batting, aren't they? But England just simply weren't persistent enough, particularly in the second innings, to truly exploit that.
Yeah, their batting is quite vulnerable. I mean, we saw this when they played in the Caribbean, although they won the three Test matches there earlier in the year. It was very much the bowlers getting them out of jail every time because the batting was pretty shambolic. I agree with you on Steve Smith. I mean, he's a great player, but he looked all at sea really. Labuschagne has got a fairly awful recent record. But is he the player he was? I don't think he is. Khawaja, I think, could be heading for the retirement quite easily. I think there are definitely some vulnerabilities in that batting lineup.
Dan, would you
Yeah,
keep with Head at the top of the order and possibly move Khawaja on and maybe move Cam Green up and bring in Bo Webster, something like that?
I mean that's another option, and Webster can also get through a few overs with the ball, can't he? I think they've got a few issues at the top of the order. I know Travis Head has come good in this one, but I didn't see that much out of Weatherall to actually sort of suggest that he's, going to be prolific at Test level. Constas, he's been the sort of the pantomime opener, hasn't he, in recent years? Will Pukowski has had to retire through concussion injuries.
Mm.
Cameron Bancroft, I see quite a lot of him at Gloucestershire, and I think Australia will be a stronger side with him in that side. I think he's a good, solid, old school opener. And what you notice, he's an accumulator. Suddenly look up at the scoreboard, he's got 70 or 80 on it. And I think Australia would be a better side with Cameron Bancroft in it. Whether they go down that route, I don't know.
If we can get into a situation, and I thought it would happen in this game, and it clearly didn't, where we can post even a reasonable first innings score. It doesn't have to be an amazing 400 or 500, but even a sort of 300, 350 score on difficult pitches. I'd be very interested to see how Australia's batting responds to that. If we can win the toss, bat first, have some luck with the Bazball approach, score fast, and get to a position where we're bowling on that first evening, but with a decent, having scored fast, having got in excess of 300, that gives us a chance, I think.
In those conditions, who are your key bowlers? Extreme pace or the people that can nibble it around a bit and are still fairly brisk themselves, such as Atkinson?
You can get too obsessed by pace over skill. I think you need a little bit of a bit of Sir Thomas More out there, man for all seasons, and I think you need someone who can do sort of a little bit of you've got the pace of Wood and Archer. Cass is no slouch, Atkinson's no slouch, but I also think that we could do with somebody who just sort of nibbles it around a little bit. One of those sort of old school English seamers like they've got with Boland, someone like that.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought Boland bowled very well. I think it wasn't so much the pace, it was the angles he created in the second innings, and that's what caused so many problems outside the off stump.
Yeah, they've got a lovely variety to their attack. They've got Boland, they've got a left arm over. They hit you from different angles, whereas, ours tend to be all right arm over pace. So I think a little bit of variety into that attack would give the Aussies something to think about, perhaps.
Do we think Josh Tongue needs to come back in? I wasn't quite sure what he did wrong that meant he wasn't there in the first place, really, but
I think he seems to be
Yeah.
first reserve. I think it'd certainly be the first cab off the rank if there are any issues with anyone that played in Perth. What do you think, Dan?
No, I don't think he's done much wrong. They seem to be putting everything into pace, don't they? And whether Tongue is quick enough, I mean, he's sort of early 80s, isn't he, opposed to sort of the early 90s that a couple of the Express boys are. Whether he's quick enough, I don't know, but he definitely hits the seam and he does nibble it around.
Yeah, and we saw that in the championship, of course, and you'd have seen that yourself, Dan, firsthand in some of the games that you covered. What about the spin option? We're probably not expecting spin in Brisbane, at least not from England. Would that be fair to say?
I think they'll probably stick with exactly the same team, with possibly Tongue for Wood. But I think more likely just the same team. They've kind of staked everything on the battery of pace bowling, and I think as they'll stick with Crawley in the batting, I think they'll stick with the similar approach with the bowling. And then if we're 2-0 down and having this conversation in a couple of weeks, I don't know where they go after that.
Well,
They
I
go
think
they
2
go
nil
wherever they're
down.
going
Yeah,
next, I guess. I don't know.
I think 2-0 down could be fairly fair. I mean, you might as well drive from Perth to Brisbane after that. It's hard enough recovering from 1-0 down in Australia, I believe. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong about this. England have only achieved that once after going 1-0 down in Australia, and that was when Len Hutton was captain.
Our record over there is pretty grim, isn't it? But also, I saw a stat the other day that it's only a Middlesex captain that has won the Ashes in Australia since Ray Illingworth in 1971, and that's Mike Brearley, Mike Gatting, Andrew Strauss.
Give me a Middlesex player that you'd play in the 11.
uh,
I can't think of one really. Can you?
I think someone like Max Holden. There's also a Middlesex bowler who's got a test record of under 20 with the ball and has never been looked at since. And that's Toby Rowland Jones. I think he
Oh
averages something like
gosh, yes, yes, yes.
19.6 from about 8 tests that he played.
Well, we know England don't have a great record at Brisbane. They last won in 1986. I think we can all just about remember that one. We can't really remember the turnaround in 1954-5. But since 1986-87, I believe we've played there on 7 occasions, lost 5, drawn 2. And one of those draws was in 98-99, where we had quite a lot of assistance from the weather.
Yes, that was definitely thanks to the weather gods. The draw in 2010-11 was it was Alistair Cook and Jonathan Trott, wasn't it? At the start of that series. We've got to be optimistic because otherwise there's not a lot of point in them carrying on with the series. I don't think they'll care. I kind of think their whole approach is to just ignore stats and history and convention and all of that, and I don't think it will even cross their mind. West Indies won there, didn't they, at the Gabba a couple of years ago? That was a day. Was that a day-nighter? I think it was.
I think it was. I think Shamar Joseph was the key wicket taker, bowled very, very well, actually.
They will probably tell themselves a much weaker team than England. West Indies have won there in recent memory, and they've just got to go out there and believe it. And they're not going to change their approach too much because they're too invested in it now.
But it's not just the pitch and the quality of the opposition. Nasser Hussain made the valid point. I'm sure you'd both agree with this, that when you play cricket in Australia, you're not just taking on 11 Australians in the field, you're taking on a whole nation. And that is what it's like. I mean, almost everyone you talk to in Australia, from whatever walk of life, even if they've never held a bat in their lives, they're all willing England and you to be on the losing side.
I think it's true. Even the guy who stamps your passport as you arrive in the country, giving you abuse, I think it continues all the way down the line. And we've seen it from their media already, haven't we? With the Western Australian newspaper getting tucked into Joe Root immediately. I wish I could share your optimism, Alan, but I'm expecting nothing less than slaughter at the Gabatoir.
Right, so we've got slaughter at the Gabatoir, and Alan, you're going for a renaissance.
Oh, I'm going for a renaissance. 1-1 going to Adelaide, and it will be very, very exciting then. Then we'll have to sort of, then it gets serious.
Final question before I move on to the cocktail. What changes, if any, would you make to either playing 11? So, Dan, I'll ask you for Australia, and Alan, I'll ask you for England.
Go and change for Australia. I think they'd be stronger with bringing in sort of someone like Bancroft or even Matt Renshaw in for Khawaja, but I think they'll go in unchanged.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Alan, England.
I think they'll go in unchanged as well. I probably would, unless there's something very bizarre in the pitch, or there's an injury to a bowler or whatever, and you get Tongue in there as a replacement. But I kind of think, as I say, they are so invested in this approach, so they need to just see it through. And then this will either be, a farewell for lots of these guys and this whole approach, or it will be remembered as one of the greatest England teams in history. So let's stick with the plan and see what happens.
Before I move on to the cocktail, again with England, we know what Matt Hayden said about Joe Root before the series. Should he be worried?
I'm much less confident about Root scoring a first 100 in Australia than I was a couple of weeks ago. That's something I'm not that optimistic about. He looked to me like someone where that whole stat had really got into his head. He didn't look comfortable, he didn't look composed, and that shot edging into his stumps, that's not how Joe Root plays. I mean, the other guys, you think, okay, that, it's hit and miss a bit, but you don't expect Joe to kind of do that, really.
Dan, do you think he'll come good?
Yeah, I do. I think he's going to get his first 100 out in Australia, and I think this tour will break quite a few people, but I think Joe Root's one of them, and I expect him to carry on for a number of years and go past that Sachin Tendulkar milestone.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. So I'm just going to leave you with the cocktail. So this is a version of a mulled wine, except I've made it with port. And I've got an explainer video on how I did it. You get your port, you get a orange, and you roast it with some cloves. Then you cut it up into little pieces, put it in a saucepan, pour the porter over it, add a bit of sugar to taste, although you don't need that much. Cheers, bottoms up.
There we go. Well, I've just got Adam's ale here. If we go 2-0 down, it's going to be hemlock, I'm afraid, next time.
Well, maybe we should go with one of Winston Churchill's quotes. If I win, I deserve champagne, and If I lose, I need it.
Very good.
Okay, so on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on Cricket and Cocktails. I'm very grateful to both of you for your input. We will reconvene later in the series. But for now, bottoms up and
Bottoms
cheerio.
up.
It's cold, it's dark, it's dreary. England have lost the first test match of the Ashes series comfortably, but let's not get too depressed. Christmas is around the corner. The Christmas lights, in fact, just went on in the local area around here. So we're going to cheer ourselves up with a little Christmas cocktail. This cocktail is called Bishop. You can drink it religiously if you want, but you don't have to be religious to drink it. There's not many ingredients required for this. You need an orange, cloves, bottle of port, and a little bit of sugar to taste, although you won't need a lot of sugar because of the natural sweetness of the port. Now the first stage is to get your cloves and gently push them into the orange like this. You'll need 12 of these. Don't be afraid to give them a good hard push. These little fellows are quite resilient. You'll need 12 of these, so it is going to look a little bit like an orange hedgehog. And then after you've got your 12 cloves pushed into the orange, we're going to wrap this up in some foil, and then we're going to bake it in the oven for a few minutes, just long enough for the skin to turn lightly brown. And then I'll get back to you with the next stage. I've cut the orange up into 8 pieces. Now, as soon as I've added all of this port, I'm going to simmer it, don't boil it, simmer it for 20 minutes. Then we're going to take it off the heat. We're going to sieve out all of the orange and all of the gunk, and then I'm going to drink some of it. I heated up the orange with all the cloves stuck in it until the skin was lightly brown. I cut it into 8 pieces. I made sure all the pips were out, and then I put that in a saucepan with a bottle of port, simmered it for 20 minutes. I've sieved it off so there isn't any gunk in there. And now, here's the little taste test. Lovely. Well, there you have it. My thanks to Alan Byrne and Dan Whiting for their input into this podcast. My thanks to Adobe for the lovely music, and my thanks to Mrs. Beeson for the lovely cocktail recipe. I should remind you that the last scheduled day for the second test match in Brisbane is December the 8th, but if we've learned anything from this first test match, it's probably best to get through the turnstiles early. Goodbye for now.